So I don't know personally many Jews. I was raised in Texas. I don't know the actual terms that they use. I mean, I've just always heard like the term that like, oh, you quit being a Jew, like you're too frugal with your money, like Jew just being like a negative term with a derogatory meaning. Like if you call someone a Jew, whether or not they're actually Jewish, doesn't matter. You're just kind of insulting them in a way.
Like the only Jewish stereotype I can think of is like the, money. But yeah, that's about it.
Jews are very cheap, like they're frugal, they're very selfish with their money.
In general, about Jews, I've heard stereotypes representing kind of income levels. So Jews are considered to be rich as compared to other patrons. Furthermore, Jews are considered to be people who, trying to word this correctly, who are a lot more frugal with their money as compared to their counterparts, meaning that they are a lot more conscious of where their money goes as opposed to other residents and citizens.
And I guess you could say like Jew someone, like that's like haggling a price or whatever.
Okay, let's see. There is the money thing. I guess I've heard that, but Jews have more money. Sometimes they tend to be stingy with their money, so they'll kind of hoard it and withhold it from other people. There's the Jewish American princess thing, which kind of has to do with the money, and more like daughters and how a father treats their daughter in a Jewish family.
Stingy.
Okay.
Good with money. Big-nosed, curly hair. That's about it.
There's of course the nose stereotype, and you get a nose job after your bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah.
So I guess the biggest one I've heard is that Jews have like a big nose or a very prominent nose.
Yeah.
I think that's the one I've heard most often.
Okay, well I know the one about Jews being like bagels or whatever, like people calling Jewish people bagels. What? I don't really know why, but I've heard it. And then I know the one about Jews being like super rich but like super stingy with their money.
Jewish people are more stingy with their money and like won't spend money even when it's like the better decision, that they just can't part with their money.
When you think of Jew, you think rich. You think, I mean, what first comes to my mind is I think rich, I think frugal, and I really think responsible about their money.
I remember watching Passion of the Christ, and it was really weird because I remember them, like the Jews killing Jesus, and I feel like I might have heard that before in church, or Sunday school or something, where like some stories say Jews killed Jesus, but then I remember also being the Romans killed Jesus, so that's kind of a weird misconception that I'm not really sure the background of it. I was almost 100% it was Romans, but then Passion of the Christ had the Jews killing Jesus.
I mean, I've heard like, I guess like people who are like super Catholic, since I'm Catholic, I've heard like some super Catholic people be like, well, the reason all these bad things happen to Jewish people is because they're the reason they like killed Jesus, so it's like coming back to get them. So I guess that's also why people like don't like Jewish people.
So that's another big rumor, is that Jews killed Jesus. So you just heard that from within the church, or? It
wasn't like the church per se, it was like, I mean, I was in a youth group, and there was this one kid, but he was like that kid who was like, guns are awesome, never abort babies, gay people are ugly and hideous and gross. So like one time, like my friend who was Jewish, like came to like the church and like she just visited because she was with me, and he told her like, and we were talking about it, and he was like, oh yeah, like the reason all these horrible things keep happening to your people is because like you guys hung our Savior on a cross. And I was like, I don't think that's right.
I've only actually ever dealt with like the monetary aspect of Jews. Always considered to be very rich, but yet frugal and selfish in a way with their wealth.
Mostly my peer group in lower and middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also followed up with the image of the nerdy accountant often portrayed in Hollywood.
Public school, definitely.
Yeah.
Like whenever like you'd like be at the snack machines and people like, dude, spot me $1, and the guy's like, no, and he's like, wow, don't be such a Jew.
Yeah.
So like I was like, what does that mean one day? And somebody was like, you know, because Jews are like super rich, but they like never get, they're like really good with money. So like.
Passion of the Christ is of course the Jews killing Jesus, one that I was exposed to there. Before that, I really can't think about exactly where I was exposed to them, because I've lived in Texas my whole life, so I really haven't had a lot of exposure to Jewish people. So a lot of it probably is from adults telling me things, and like just little like side jokes that adults have said and that like I've kind of overheard. And I really haven't had anybody there to be like, Jenna, like this is not right, like that's not true. Just because I haven't really been exposed to many Jewish people living in Houston, Texas, which is unfortunate because I've liked most of the ones that I've come across here at Rice. But yeah, it's probably a lot from just adults saying things that they knew as the stereotypes that kind of passed down to me as a child that I overheard, or a teenager.
I don't know, I've never thought of that. I guess probably my parents. My dad's not very politically correct, so he's probably said it a few times.
I can't think of a specific experience, but I'm pretty sure my parents were definitely like, they would make like jokes about it or something. Be like, yeah, like Jews have so much money and blah blah blah. And I guess being at Rice, it's kind of unfortunately been propagated, because I mean most people at Rice have money, and I've met most of my Jew friends at Rice.
So that's actually a very good question. Kind of where I was exposed to these stereotypes. So in reality, the first time that I actually met Jewish people was during college. The first time I met people who were of Jewish descent was when we all went to a Hillel, kind of not conference but meeting. Yeah. And we actually got to interact with people who were of Jewish descent. Other than that, I really haven't met people who practice Judaism aside from a few number of people, but not in excessive amounts. So where do I get these stereotypes from? It's a very difficult question, but I think an obvious answer for sure is definitely pop culture.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of the stereotypes that we hear are from TV shows, movies, news, other mediums. But I think for sure, like a lot of what we hear is from those shows and movies.
My roommate was in like The Merchant of Venice.
Okay.
And there was a play about like a really stingy Jewish guy.
Yeah.
And I guess I've read it like in other books too. I'm not entirely sure like which ones.
Yeah.
But I went and saw her in The Merchant of Venice. Well, half of it. So.
High school, a little bit through like, you know, your generic television shows, late night television shows, Saturday Night Live, that kind of thing.
I think interestingly, most of them have come from people I know that are Jewish.
Yeah.
I had one friend at summer camp who was Jewish, and she would, whenever she saw somebody with a big nose, she would point to them and go, "Oh look, brother from another mother! Like look, there's another Jew." I don't know if I've actually heard many Jewish stereotypes from people that aren't Jewish.
That's probably through movies more so than anything.
Yeah. Media.
Yeah, the media is definitely, probably in a lot of instances, enunciated that more so than other features.
You ever see Hobbit?
Yeah, I watched Hobbit, but I fell asleep towards the end.
Because I feel like the dwarves in the beginning was like totally a metaphor for Jews. Because they were like kicked out of their homelands, and then like the king was like super greedy and stuff.
So, Jews being bagels, like what do you mean by that? Like being an actual bagel, or is there like characteristics of a bagel?
You know, I honestly don't know. I just heard somebody say it once. Like, one of my friends was like hooking up with like a Jewish guy, and like my friend texted her and was like, "Don't hook up with a bagel," and I was like, "Why did you call him that?" Like I thought it was like a joke on the guy, and he was like, "That's what Jewish people are called. They're called bagels," and I was like, "Oh, okay," and then I like never really got any clarification on that.
That it was kind of a recent, after most of the Jews immigrated into America after World War II and during, that is, I don't know, I haven't done any research on it, I don't know much about the history of how it came about, but I would guess that it would either have to do with when a lot of the Jews came over to America, they quickly like gained fortune, and then it was just like the stereotype, because you had like very poor Irish and a lot of other poor immigrants, and then the Jews were coming over, they all had some previous wealth, and they were always a really wealthy class in the upper Northeast. The only other thing I consider maybe is when you had places like Auschwitz and they were taking all of their jewelry and mean, what's always highlighted in books like The Diaries of Anne Frank, some other ones that talk about World War II, is that they always donated, like they would steal their gold teeth, they would steal all their diamonds, their gold rings and everything, and the Jews were always known to have a lot of jewelry, like they were very wealthy with that.
So with the Jews killing Jesus, that probably started historically. Potentially the Romans who were Christians taught that in church as a way to kind of give off some of the responsibility for their actions in killing Jesus. And kind of the church used it to blame Jews for this big event that happened.
I know, like, I guess before the Holocaust, I mean, I know that Jews, like, a lot of them were, like, in that kind of business or whatever. So I don't know if maybe, like, during the Holocaust to, like, that was just a thing, like, we're poor because Jews took all the money, or, like, after the Holocaust, if that was just, like, after the Jews were freed.
I think they've originated across several millennia. I think that they have roots in several different places and are propagated by different people. I think that the base idea is likely been put forth time and time again, and I think that the 4 stereotypes I've named are only a few that have been put forth against Jews across the ages. And while those are the current ones, I can't imagine that anyone's made them up recently. I think that they're just recycling past arguments, which likely went back to someone being pissed off at Jews a millennia ago. I mean, if you look at it, they're nothing new. They were used in the Hitler's arguments against the Jews. They've been used in current modern neo-Nazi arguments in Greece, and they were used in Spanish Inquisition. I'm sure that they were used before that.
Okay, so if you were to like pinpoint a time period, when do you think the stereotypes, if you were to just guess, pretend this is
I think that the money ones would be likely in the 1500s to 800s, 1500s, somewhere around that time. The Christians outlawed loaning money with interest to other people, and so the Jews, being outside the Catholic Church, were able to still loan money out to others, and I think a lot of the monetary ones came from that. I think the big noses came from just, I mean, look at you, I've got a fairly big schnoz.
The nose thing probably originated in the biblical days, I'm assuming, because that's been probably a feature that's been prominent for a while. It doesn't just like pop up out of the blue like evolution.
I don't know, maybe Jews are just really good with money. Maybe I guess it's kind of like the Asians are smart, they're going to be doctors, Jews are good with money, they're going to be accountants. See, honestly, I'm just going to put it out there, even though people say that, maybe I don't know a lot of Jews, but I don't really know that many rich people who are like, because they're Jewish, I don't know any, like all my Jewish friends are like middle class, so they're like, there's like nothing special about them, so I never really knew why that stereotype was. I just thought about it historically, like it's just one of those things that just like was said and is going to keep being said.
I would think that the kind of money stereotype and being stingy probably also originated during the early 1900s. I would think that Jewish American princesses are probably a pretty recent thing. As parents, kind of the Jewish Americans have been able to come in and like make their money. In the, I would assume, 40s and 50s, they came in and they were able to build themselves up, made a really good career for themselves, and made money, and then they had their children or their grandchildren, and that is kind of when the Jewish American princesses started, when they kind of made their money in America and maybe faced persecution for having money in a new place and being successful people.
I think anti-Semitism has been around a pretty long time.
Right you are, Sean. These stereotypes have been around for a long time. They're nothing new. They date back thousands of years and have a deep, rich history. And that's something that I sort of didn't realize before I looked into it more. I sort of thought that stereotypes were an invention of modern times, and that they didn't have such a deep history. I didn't realize that they're really old stereotypes that were then taken to an extreme by the Nazi Party in order to dominate the Jews. And that's when these stereotypes sort of became dangerous, because they allowed for the elimination of millions of Jews. That's why when nowadays I hear people say, oh yeah, Jews have so much money, like, oh, you're just rich because you're Jewish. It really scares me because I know how dangerous these stereotypes can get when they're used, not properly, but effectively. And it scares me that these stereotypes still exist today, and people still believe these things despite everything being discredited multiple times. Yeah. And it scares me when I hear people say, oh, Jews have all the money, or, oh, like, all those rich Jews. Because I think back to the Holocaust and how those stereotypes were the foundation for the public wanting to eliminate the Jews to get all their money, because apparently the Jews have all the money and are in control, when really being Jewish doesn't really help you make money. So I really learned a lot from this project, and I was impressed by how many of my friends did accurately predict the deeper history of these stereotypes. Something that I had never really thought into, but it's very important.